And welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special interview lined up. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the middle of the AFLW off season. So I thought I'd take some time and find some fun little chats to get us in this short time what we may see between the end of this season and the start of the next season, shall we say, for those on YouTube. Yes, I did air quotes. So I grabbed a great journalist from Melbourne, Miss Sarah Burt. Sarah, so wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
All right. A little bit of background, ladies and gentlemen. I heard this lovely young lady chat with a good friend of the podcast, Mr. Craig Wessels, the Yank on the footy. I loved what she had to say. And I thought, you know what? Let's see if she'll hop on this podcast. We can learn a little bit more about her and talk footy. So really quickly, Sarah, for those that don't know who you are, just a little bit about yourself outside of the game of footy.
Oh, outside of the game of footy, I am Sarah. I live in Melbourne. I live in a suburb just near the beach here, which sounds pretty different to where you are, Donnie. Yes, I'm a Blues supporter, although that's actually not outside of the game of footy. What else can I tell you? I am a dog mum to a beautiful Labrador called Tilly, who you might hear bark in the background. I'm sorry if she does. Yeah, I don't know what else I can tell you about me. I'm not that interesting.
Well, we'll get to one of the big reasons that you're connected to footy here in just a little bit. So we'll leave that as our little tease. So really quickly, I love asking this question because, again, growing up as an American, I don't have this sport as much as you would, as say basketball or American football or hockey or different things like that. So I always ask, what is your favorite part about the game of football?
My favourite part is, it probably will come as no surprise, being a journalist, is the stories behind the athletes and why they play and what they have to go through in their lives to make it happen, to make the training commitments, to structure their lives around the game that they love. I just think that athletes are so fascinating, and their reasons behind why they love the game is so fascinating. So it's all a bit meta, but I love about the game what they love about the game. That's sort of what fascinates me, and hearing all of their stories behind what they give up. Yeah, that's sort of what's drawn me to love the game so much. But in particular, AFLW, what I love about that game is the inclusive culture, and how it just seems to bring together every corner of our society here, and hopefully your society there. I'm not sure, I haven't been to Iowa, but it seems to just bring people together, and particularly in AFLW, it brings people together that possibly haven't always felt as included in our society. So that's one thing that I really love.
Awesome. And it's I know several of the people that listen to the podcast know this, but I am a diehard Sydney Swans supporter. And I always love, I brag about this a little bit, and sorry for those that listen to this podcast a lot, is that I'm an AFLW foundation member for the Swans. Very, very proud of that particular one. One of the reasons I love talking AFLW. So we'll get a little bit more of an AFL twist a little bit later in the podcast. So I got to ask this again, growing up with it, again, I don't have a lot of memories outside of certain things that I grew up with. So what's your earliest footballing memory that you have?
Going to probably offend Tigers supporters, but I have three brothers, and my dad also, they all go for Richmond. So in recent years, it's been really exciting for them and pretty painful for me talking footy, but my mum's not that into football, so I'd go to the footy with my three brothers and dad, and my earliest memory is being at the MCG and the Tigers losing to Essendon, I think it was at that time, by a lot, and me being really upset because dad made us leave at 3/4 time.
Oh boy. Those
Yes.
are always those are always the fun fans, and I know that we have several people over here, and I don't know if Craig ever told you this, but he's ribbed Richmond a lot these last years. Like he's had trouble finding Richmond supporters because he went on with the gag of how they wouldn't go over to Docklands, over to Marvel, and so he continues on it whenever he can. Like when he sees Richmond supporters that are going to go to Adelaide or go to Perth to watch him play, and he goes, "And you can't go to Marvel." So there's always he kind of ribs them a little bit, and I know he does it during the fun, but you can definitely tell there's a lot of gist to that. So I'm gonna ask this. Did you ever play? I mean, as a young lady, did you ever play footy? And if so, what position did you play?
Oh, I played. I did Auskick, so the junior equivalent,
Mhm.
but you don't necessarily play the game. That's sort of just drills and that sort of stuff. But I played Auskick for. I think the girls have had to stop at that point. They don't anymore, thank goodness. But I had to
Mhm.
stop when I was about 10. So that was the end of my sparkling footy career.
I know, and unfortunately, that's the way it goes. But really, really quickly, if you would have had the pathway to AFLW, when would you have tried, or are you one of those that you love your current job that you have currently? Just really quick.
I absolutely would have tried. Yeah, I love playing sport. I loved netball growing up and still do. I absolutely would have tried, but it's probably a blessing in disguise that I didn't because you can't ride on it if you're playing it. So
Mm-hmm.
yes,
That
very happy
makes
in my job.
makes tons of sense. So you kind of alluded to it really quickly. You said your club is the Blues. You also said your brother's a Tigers fan. So how did you become a Blues fan with Tigers brothers? And is your father a Tigers fan? I guess correctly.
Yeah, Dad's Tigers. My grandfather is a Blues fan, and I don't remember ever making the decision. I think I have a twin brother, and we're some of the eldest amongst all of our cousins. So I think I'm not sure, but I think possibly Gramps just shotgunned one of the twins and we came out
Mhm.
to go for the Blues. But yeah, I don't ever remember making the decision. Yeah.
That is great. And I gotta ask this, and maybe it's a little bit of the American society, but sometimes with Americans, we can change. We get a little finicky, and when we change sides because our team isn't playing well. I mean, I think most people know American sports, the Browns, or the Detroit Lions, or some of the teams that don't play well. Sometimes the fans jump off it. So, have you ever wavered with all of the years? Unfortunately, with Carlton not being as successful as I think many fans were, have you ever wavered and thought, I'll change clubs?
I haven't actually. I really love it sounds a bit cliche, but no, I've always loved Carlton and I love what they stand for. And I think it's one of those things once um you get to know the stories behind the players and all of that sort of thing. And I suppose once it's more familiar to you, you're more inclined to hang around. So yes, I'm 28 years old, and I think the last time they won a premiership, I was about 2 or 1. I'm very excited about how they're doing this year. Yesterday's game was awesome. And yes, I'm very happy that I didn't jump ship because we're finally starting to see some good results.
That's absolutely great, and it's one of the things that being an American, unfortunately, it happens a lot more. But I've told many of my fellow Swan supporters, I said I chose them after the around the 2012 grand final. No, it wasn't a full on bandwagon grand final. I had enjoyed the Bloods culture. I had leached into it. And I loved the way they played. So I fell in love with them around the 2012 grand final. I became an international member in 2016. And I still say to this day, I have not regretted it once. I thoroughly enjoy it. So that's really cool to see you stay on that. So we'll jump away from the past a little bit and go to your present. As you said, you're a sports journalist currently, I believe with the Age, correct?
Yes, yeah.
All righty. So I gotta ask, Why sports journalism? I mean, I know there's plenty of different ways you can go with sports journalism. You kind of preface it a little bit. You love sports, so, but why sports journalism?
Well, I won't say that I fell into it because that's certainly not the case at all. But I always wanted to be a writer. That's always been my dream, I suppose. And when I went to uni, I studied communications. And so honing my writing skills was always, I suppose, the priority for me. So I didn't leave uni thinking that I had to be a sports journalist, but I did leave uni thinking that I had to be writing. And then it was sort of serendipitous because, as I said, I love sport, and I started working at Hawthorn Footy Club in the media department. And as I sort of said before, once you get to know a game or get to know people in the game, it sort of expands your love for it, I suppose. And so that's sort of where I really learnt more and more about footy and about the culture of working in footy, and I really enjoyed it. And then following that, I went to Fox Sports News in Sydney. So that was really exciting to learn sort of broadcast journalism as well. I really loved that because that still involves a lot of writing, obviously, but it's not necessarily a full-blown desk job, which is something that also led me into sports journalism, is that you're not sitting at your desk all day, sort of slave to the 9 to 5, even though sometimes I don't love working on the weekends. Yeah, that's sort of how it landed. I then went to the AFL and was in their communications department. And unfortunately, then COVID hit. So once that happened, I then decided it was my chance to jump back over to the journalism side of things rather than being in the PR world, which is sort of primarily what the job at the AFL was. And yeah, it was sort of a silver lining of COVID and there not being much work around, was that I had time to do a few short courses and really work on freelance writing. And that's sort of how I've landed here. I suppose that the opening at the age was that I had quite an in-depth knowledge of the women's game. And yeah, there's a lot of AFL men's journalists around, but at the time there wasn't necessarily that sort of in-depth knowledge of the women's game. Yeah, that's sort of how I ended up where I am.
Hey, every single move that happens always kind of helps you develop as a writer. And the best part is that I love that you have that opportunity to discuss the AFLW, because again, being somebody over here, there's not as much information that you do have with the men's. With men's, there's so many different outlets. So having an outlet for the women's, I think, is absolutely fantastic. But we'll talk about that just in a little bit. So kind of really quickly, and I know it kind of bounces around a little bit. What's kind of your typical day of work for you?
Yeah, well, as you alluded to before, at the moment, the women are in a break. For how long, we don't know, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. If we look at middle of the season on a Saturday, which is probably the busiest day, I'll get up, take Tilly for a walk, have a coffee, and then I normally have done most of my research in the couple of days preceding. Team lists will normally come out on a Thursday night. So Friday is normally my big day for looking at team changes, researching anyone that's debuting that I might not know about, all that sort of thing, looking at the stats and just prepping my notes. And yeah, so most of that would be done. And then, on the Saturday, it was interesting because this season, a lot of the weekends I did 2 or 3 games. So that meant that I had to do the games from home, because even if they're both in Melbourne, it's not like a MCG to Marvel situation. It's Casey Fields, and then
Mm-hmm.
you know, like it's just two fields in the middle of nowhere, basically 2 hours apart. So a lot of the time I have to do it from home, which is an interesting dynamic too. And yeah, I listen to the radio commentary while I'm writing normally, which is really helpful to have other perspectives. And yeah, match report away.
Awesome. Hey, and to each their own. Everybody kind of handles it differently, and that's really cool. That's a really busy day. So you bounced around from several different jobs. Again, COVID, darn you, because it changes some things, but in something it could have been a blessing in disguise. But any good stories of places that you've been, like funny things that have happened, different situations that have given you a funny perspective. So a good story that you might have of either now at the age or maybe even prior.
Yeah. One story I always remember is when I was working at the AFL, the night before the grand final, the men's grand final, all of the TV journos they all want to do a live cross with the cup from the MCG the night before. So I was literally in shorts and runners running laps around the MCG because they were trying to all get each other out of shot. So they were just all on like totally different, there's about 5 or 6 of them on totally different areas of the MCG. And I was literally bolting around the concourse holding the Premiership Cup. which was pretty interesting. And of course they all do their live crosses at the same time, like weather's at like 6:31 or whatever. So that was more so a test of my fitness than anything else. But
that is great.
I think probably my most exciting memory with footy, and I wasn't actually writing on it at this point, was the first ever women's game at Icon Park, where we all had to, literally people were elbowing each other out of the way to try and get in. And luckily, I managed to get in with a couple of my friends, but a lot of people got locked out. But that will always be etched in my memory, that game. It was nothing short of amazing.
Definitely, for sure. And I remember hearing about that. It just, the lockout, and there were people trying to find their way to peek in so they could watch the game that couldn't get into the stand. So absolutely fantastic. So being a sports journalist, occasionally you get interviews, and I always want to hear this. What's your favorite interview that you've ever done for either the age or for previous jobs?
Oh, that is a tricky one. One that I really enjoyed this year was Sarah Rowe from Collingwood, purely just because she's hysterical. She's so funny, and there's nothing better than finishing an interview just like, she just gives amazing quotes and amazing insight because she's so funny. But it's also really interesting behind all of that, how much she sacrifices to play the game, because she does half of her year in Ireland and plays Gaelic football there, and then half her year here. And it's going to be interesting to see now, if they're, pending the August start date, how that affects her career. But it's really amazing, everything that she sacrifices. In that article, we sort of focused on, I think the headline ended up being like the real life Hannah Montana, because she lives in 2 different worlds. And it was really interesting to hear her perspective of that, and also the way that mentally she has to, when she gets back home to Ireland, which she still considers Ireland home, she has to switch straight back into that. I'm a professional Gaelic footballer, and sort of remove herself from thoughts of AFL because it's a different game. But then she comes here, and it's, focusing on her friends here, her team here, and that game. So even just hearing mentally how she sort of has to compartmentalize half her year was really, really interesting. So I really enjoyed that this year. But in general, speaking to a lot of the Indigenous players is often my favourite, because they have such a deep, deep connection to the land that the game is played on, and such a rich history with Australia in general, which the game sort of aligns with. Obviously, the game is much newer than their connection to the land, but they just have a really beautiful spiritual take on the land that the game is played on, and I really always enjoy hearing about that. And I just love Indigenous round. It's always just such beautiful stories come out of that. So
yeah, 100% agree. I don't know if you can see it. Mostly in YouTube will see it. I have the Swans Indigenous jersey, and last year I purchased an Indigenous round footy that I have. And I always keep those up because I always love that. I love that the Swans jumper is absolutely fantastic. So I proudly display that, because I think those are two of my favorite things that I have connected to footy myself. I completely agree. Like, I love the stories you get from the Indigenous players and the connection to Mongrook and all that. So absolutely fantastic. So we jump from that, and you have your favorite, but I've seen this before, that even American journalists sometimes have this, that they're fans at heart and they love writing, but they get starstruck. They get that one person that they never expected to talk to. So I got to ask, have you ever been starstruck in an interview and been like, oh my God, I cannot believe this has ever happened? And who was it?
Yes, I was starstruck a few weeks ago, before the final. So it wasn't a one-on-one interview. It was at the press conference, which I probably should have watered it down for me, but I was completely starstruck meeting Daisy Pearce. It was, just the way that she holds herself, outside of how incredible a player she is, an incredible a person, the way that she speaks and holds herself, I didn't find her intimidating, but I was just completely starstruck, and I just didn't even know how to introduce myself. Probably didn't help that Taylor Harris was standing behind me waiting for her turn to speak. Definitely with Daisy.
Awesome. Hey, that's a good one. In fact, I had an opportunity at USAFL Nationals a few years ago to talk to Erin Phillips, and I totally chickened out. I really wanted to. She was talking with a couple of players to my right, and I have some female players who I'd coached over here who were actually playing at the time, and I happened to see her, and I walked over and I got probably within 10 feet. And I chickened out. I so wanted to introduce myself and be like, hey, I'm a coach over here. I have 3 of my players over here. I'd love after the game to introduce you, to be able to talk. And I totally chickened out. So I know exactly how that feels. So
I would be the same with Erin. I've never interviewed Erin, but I can tell you now, right now, I'd be the same.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun experience to be able, but I kicked myself a few times for not being able to go talk with her. So we jump from starstruck to, I'm gonna give you that opportunity. Who is the one player, men's, women's, I'll leave it up to you, your dream interview to sit down and have a chat with, to either set up either an on-camera interview or a written interview?
It would be Erin Phillips. Yeah, absolutely. I just think, in general, her sporting story is just so prolific. And even now, moving clubs, like, it would be even better to speak to her, reflecting on her time. On her time with Adelaide, and now jumping ship. I just think it would be, I shouldn't say jumping ship, that sounds like dismissive, but moving clubs. I would just absolutely love to pick her brain about her career in general, and her, like, she has such a rich life, balancing all of that with family and a wife, and making these huge decisions like the move to Port. And I would love to speak to Erin.
Yeah, that would be a fantastic one for sure. Just the stories you'd hear from her professional days over here, and then going back, and everything that she did with her dad with Port Adelaide. So I'll say this honestly: her move to Port was the least kept secret ever. As much as coy as she was about the whole thing and all the interviews that everybody asked the question, are you looking at Port? And she'd always answer it with so much class. And that's Erin for you. But it was the worst kept secret ever. We all knew if she was going to have a chance to play for Port, she would. Let's just be honest there. Let's just be honest. Even me over here, I said it in our grand final. I said she was coy about it. I said she was respectful to the Crows Footy Club, but she's going to go to Port. Let's just accept it right now. We all know it's going to happen. So it was the least kept secret ever when she announced she was going to Port. So we'll focus more on the women in just the tiniest bit. I'm going to let you geek out a little bit. We'll talk about the men's really quickly. Carlton Footy Club, they are playing fantastic footy right now. Had a couple of moments there, but they're playing really good footy right now. How excited are you as a Carlton fan? And I'm going to say this, and I mean this jokingly. Are Carlton fans literally buying grand final tickets now, or was that just a meme moment that everybody went too far for?
I am pumped. I'm really, really excited. Particularly, you've caught me the morning after a massive win last night. So I'm really, really excited. There was a time, sort of the last couple of seasons, where people have said that Paddy Cripps is possibly past his prime. I'm so glad that he's proven those people wrong. We just have, obviously I'm biased because I do support them, but I just think that we've had a really strong list for a few years now. We've had some really young, talented players. We're finally seeing them gel together. I don't know if the changing coach has had anything to do with that. I think it probably has, but the previous coaching staff have helped to develop those players to where they are now. So I am bloody excited. And I reckon there probably are us Blues fans buying grand final tickets. I saw a tweet this morning from an ex-AFL player saying that the only question for Blues fans this morning is how much we're going to beat Melbourne by in the grand final.
Oh boy, that as awesome as that to bring up, it's maybe a little premature there because Melbourne again showed their class yesterday against St. Kilda for sure. I can't wait for that matchup between the Blues and Melbourne because I think the way Melbourne's midfield is playing right now, it is going to be one dynamite a game for absolutely for sure. I've said for a couple of years I thought that their list was so much better than how they were playing. I think Coach Voss has come in and really he's kind of brought a lot of the expectations and been able to get the players to play up to what I think the expectations were. I mean, you brought in Saad and Williams last year, and I think a lot of people thought, there's your two pieces, your running halfback flankers that can move the ball up the field, that can use that attacking. You have Walsh, you have Cripps, you have Harry Mackay kind of blew up last year, and you had a great year last year, but there was still the defensive vulnerabilities that I think really cost you a lot last year. I don't think they're 100% solved, but they're definitely not as glaring as they were last year. So we'll definitely see how the season kind of goes. So it's been fun to see the Blues fans excited. And I'll say this, round one, when you guys beat Richmond, to hear the Blues fans roar as you scored more and more in Richmond, and for the first time hearing a Richmond game where the Richmond Tigers fans aren't roaring everybody out of the stands was absolutely fantastic. So
you should have seen me with my brothers.
I bet. Oh, you probably had so much fun with that one. That would have been absolutely fantastic. And I say this as a Swans fan. Thank you for letting Georgie Hewitt be the player I always knew he could be. I think that was the one issue he had up in Sydney was he had Joey Kennedy, he had Luke Parker, he had Rowbottom, he had some of these young players that kind of took his place. And I think he's found a perfect spot there as your defensive style sitting midfielder to let Cripps and Walsh go have their fun. So I think he's in a place he's going to be successful. As much as I would have loved to kept Georgie Hewitt here, he's gone somewhere I think he's going to be very successful. So there's a little part of me that loves watching the Blues, and Nick Newman is also a former Swans player too, that I kind of keep an eye on those two. And I'm happy that they're successful. So there's a little bit
Yeah.
of me that cheers for the Blues as well.
Oh,
So it's awesome. And unfortunately, we'll be against each other in a couple rounds. Sydney and Carleton play round 10. So we have one more round before that one happens. So there
game
might
on.
be, might be some fun banter back and forth. And I know I'm friends with the Blue Abroad because I interviewed Terry Degani for my Swan support for my Aussie supporter series. And he's like, mate, you should come on and do a Swans preview game with me. So I may be on Blue Abroad chatting that here in a week or so. So that'll be fantastic. But that's all we're going to do for the men, because I think the women need to be discussed a little bit more. There's so many men's, we'll get plenty of men's discussion. So we're going to jump to the women's really quickly. Let's go with your team, Carleton, really quick before we kind of go the whole AFLW. I'm going to say it personally. This was a team that sadly disappointed me a little bit with the roster, with the list that they had. This was a team that at the start of the year, I said they were going to be with a chance to get to the finals. They just never really panned out the way I thought they would. Is that kind of how it was seen in Carleton land, that this was a season that just never materialized the way we thought they would?
Yeah, I agree. I was disappointed too. Prefacing that by the fact that it was almost impossible to predict what was going to happen week in, week out, because there was just so many ins and outs with COVID health and safety protocols. I was doing the expert tipping in the Age every week, and like I was just getting roasted by all my friends and family because they're like, why'd you tip that? Like, they're obviously not going to win. I was like, God, seriously, have a look at the players that are out. And it was so impossible to predict what was going to happen, because you had coaches out, you had captains out, you had all, so I think one week we had like half our midfield out, and it was just so. Prefacing it with that, yes, I was disappointed in how the Blues went. I think we, as you say, we have a really strong list. And I know I just said this about the men's, but I genuinely do think that we have a really, really strong list. I think something that I felt was that our attacking side of things needed to be stronger. There was quite a few games that I felt we just couldn't capitalize. Like, we're getting the ball down there, but we just can't get it between the sticks. And that's really the one place, obviously, where you need to be strong in. And I think defensively, I actually think that we were quite strong most of the time, pending which players were out. But when you look at the stats, we weren't often as behind as the scoreboard showed we were. So, I was disappointed in that. And I think it's a little bit frustrating because we've been pretty gutted now with expansion teams, which I personally am supportive of. I think we've got to grow the game somehow. So players have got to go where they can. They get paid nothing, next to nothing. They've got to go where they can. But yeah, I think it was sort of a missed opportunity this year with the list that we did have to really capitalize on that.
And I think it was kind of one of those, you look at their list and you went, my gosh, how do these ladies not play better than they did? It was just, and I agree. It was like, and the other thing I saw is when you have Georgia G, you have Darcy Vesio, you have Maddie Prasparkas, you have Grace Egan, you have a lot of talent on your list. It was just, there was just something missing between midfield and forward to where it just wasn't clicking. And that was very frustrating because you looked at the names and you go, how are you guys not playing better? Like, and you don't want to put it personally on the players, but you kind of looked and you went, why was this happening? So I think that was one of those that they were one of my teams that I was frustrated with, because I looked at that list and I thought, this is a finals team if you just look at it on paper. And it just never really materialized. So we'll back out of the Blues just the littlest bit. I know it's not easy, but we'll back out of the Blues a little bit. overall AFLW season 6, personally, I'm going to say this. It was fantastic footy. I absolutely enjoyed the product. I enjoyed what I saw. Yes, it was chaos at times. Absolutely. I will give you it was absolute chaos with COVID this, COVID that, injuries this, ACL that. Absolutely insane. So as somebody that wrote about it every day, just really quickly, I mean, how happy were you that we got the entire season through? Yes, with hiccups. We'll admit that. But how excited are you that another year down, more progression, and I think a lot more interest in the game because now we see 4 new teams hop in, and we'll talk about expansion here in just a little bit. So, thoughts on season 7 on season 6?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm super, super excited. And I think even although the amount of ACLs, injuries that we saw, the amount of poor players that got COVID and missed important games, all of that sort of stuff, I think the general conversation, certainly here in Australia, was swirling more and more around the women's. And even the discussion of next season we'll have 4 more teams. I think there certainly it was sort of tapping into those supporters of the 4 new teams who were starting to sort of have a bit more interest in preparation for when their teams come in. And I think, there's more opportunities for people like myself to be writing, commentating, speaking on the women's game in more mainstream media, which there's more eyeballs on it, so there's more interest. But in terms of the talent, I personally feel like the structures in the game and the way the game's played, it just grows exponentially every year. Last season, season 5, I thought, we've probably hit the mark where we'll now sort of patter out, and this is how the game will sit for now. But this season, you're right, they just absolutely, the skill level has just grown exponentially. And in the next couple of seasons, I think it will as well, because there's, number one, going to be more opportunity for more players on the AFLW stage. But number 2, in the next few years, we're going to start seeing players that are allowed to have played from Auskick, didn't have to stop when they were 10 years old like me, and they're going to be starting to come through in the draft. And that's going to be just a whole new ball game because they've grown up playing it. And it will be really interesting to see in terms of injuries. I know there's research being done on why the women keep doing their ACLs, but it'll be really interesting to see if that injury happens less because the women's bodies are more used to playing AFL. All those sort of things. I think the game's really going to change over the next sort of 4 or 5 years. So this season was so exciting, and I'm chomping at the bit to see the next season because it's going to be very different with 4 new teams. So yes.
100% agree. I mean, in looking at some of the young stars that we have to look forward to, I mean, looking at it just right on the top of my head, Ellie McKenzie at Richmond, Charlie Rowbottom at Gold Coast, Georgie Pasparkis at Geelong. There's so many great young stars in this league that have been playing most of their lives. I cannot wait for the next batch to come through. You're going to get these 18-year-olds that have been playing since they were 4 or 5 years old. So the skill is going to get better. And then crossing our fingers, hopefully this happens in the next CBA, is once these ladies become professional and can train the entire time, the skill will get better. I know the trolls don't want to hear that, but I will say this right now: you give these ladies the right pay and you let them train on, they are going to knock your socks off with how good they can play the game of footy. I have seen it each and every year. There has been a progression, and there are some absolute superstars that will explode if they get the opportunity. So we will look at that. So we kind of jumped into it. 4 new teams. Expansion has happened. Expansion signings have run rampant. And as we already kind of discussed, being a Blues fans, unfortunately, the Blues have kind of been gutted in the midfield with losing Maddie Prasparkas and Georgia G to the Essendon Bombers. And now Grace Egan has informed the club she wants to go to Richmond. So you said earlier you don't mind this because you know this is going to happen for expansion to be able to see some of these superstars. And again, I'm on the opposite side. I'm on an expansion team that right now we're rating GWS with Beck Privatelli, Ali Morfitt, and there's one other one I'm can't think of her right now. I don't know why. Then have left the GWS Giants and have come over to Sydney. And I know that there's still some talk that Sydney's trying to get some other people who we'll have to see. So I understand it. And I know some fans are getting upset that some of these teams are getting rated, but this is the last time this is going to happen. This is the last expansion, at least unless Tassie gets a license. This is the last expansion. So this is going to kind of even out the list. So kind of your thoughts on some of the expansion news, and have any surprised you?
Yeah, any of the moves?
Yeah.
I was surprised by Sparkus, which I've said to other people and they have had a different opinion. But I actually think possibly I'll try not to be so Blues focused, but I do think that that shake-up might actually be good for the Blues. I think they're possibly too reliant on Sparkus. But going back to the expansion in general, look, I went in knowing that every team was going to be completely rated. And as you say, the Swans are rating GWS. They always were going to. And that was very much something that I always had in the back of my mind writing on the footy this year, was this is the last time that we're going to see this whole cohort all together, because without a doubt, people are going to move. I probably have a pretty positive outlook on it, because I'm just really excited about the expansion of the game, and I'm excited that, as you say, this is the last time it's going to happen. So while it's unfortunate for the players, and I know some of the coaches aren't too happy with it, Brisbane Lions, but I think it's time. Like it's got to happen at some point. And I know that's frustrating for the players who are here, playing their careers at this moment, that they have to endure it. But it's going to open up so many more opportunities. And the reality is it's going to make it more competitive. And for those individual players that might not be happy with other players moving on, it's going to bring them new opportunities and hopefully more pay, better conditions, more resources. So I actually haven't been that surprised by any of them, because we just don't know what they're being offered at other clubs, and because in my opinion, the benchmark is so low, they're not getting paid enough, they're not getting the resources that they need. I just don't blame anyone for moving on.
and I 100% agree. And it's like, I think it's the one thing that's always kind of fascinated me is so many people are like, well, my team's getting rated, I'm going to be angry. I'm like, you have to understand, with expansion, players are going to have to move. And for me, I'll say this: it wasn't a surprise, but it was just more of it was intriguing to see it. And that was Bonnie Toogood leaving the Western Bulldogs, because with Isabel Hunting putting in her request to go to GWS, I think honestly that's a good move for her, because this lets her become kind of the focal point. Where I thought Bonnie Toogood now she gets to be the leader. She gets to be pardon the pun here, top dog at the Western Bulldogs. She was going to be the marquee person. Everybody talked Isabel Huntington, and Bonnie Toogood was kind of like Robin to her Batman. So when she requested to Essendon, I was kind of like, well, that was a little surprising, because now she's going to, again, kind of be that second fiddle to Maddie Prasparkas and Georgia G. It was like, it was a very interesting, surprising move for me. And I almost look at it and I go, Essendon has just what they've brought in. They kind of intimidate you a little bit with the skill that they've brought in. Now, again, they've got to fill out the rest of their list, and who knows who of their VFLW they're going to bring up. Are there going to be any more moves, so on and so forth. But right now, with the 4 expansion teams, Port Adelaide, again, they're still very early. Yes, you get Aaron Phillips, so that's instantly a game changer for most people. But Essendon right now has just what they've signed, have a very intriguing start to their AFLW season. So they're going to be the expansion team right now. I look at they could be very competitive if they get a good team around G, Prasparkas, and Bonnie Toogood.
Yeah, I still think Bonnie Toogood. I still do think that she absolutely has the potential to be the top dog at Essendon. I mean, I know she's sort of competing with Prasparkas for that, but I think, yeah, as I said, I'm not sure if that was something that she even took into account. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to ask her, but knowing that Essendon are probably offering more than what the Dogs were. I dare say they were if they've managed to wrangle some of the best players in the league already. I think it'll be a really positive move for her, and also just for the development of them to play under new coaches, to play with. For her to play alongside Prasparkas, I think that, and that's what she's used to. She's used to playing alongside the likes of Izzy Huntington. So she might actually find that comforting, playing alongside another superstar. So you're right, it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, and a little bit too, and I agree with, somebody did an article and they were chatting with Isabel Huntington about the move to GWS, and she pretty much said she was making the decision not because of football, but because of what she wants to do in her career after. So I think it's another thing that I think we don't always think about, because I think we all look at it in the men's perspective, is that everything is done football reasons specifically. A person moves so they can go in a premiership here. For the ladies, it's not the same thing. A lot of their moves may be more towards, where's their career going? Is this closer to the job that they have? Is it less travel for them because of the pay and everything like that? So I also look at it too, as a lot of these moves probably may have more off the field impact than it's more for the on the field impact. So I 100%, like I said, I've never had any issues with any of the girls moving. Some of them, like I said, have been intriguing, but then I have to sit there and tell myself, well, they're moving not because of football. They're moving probably for the betterment of them, their career and everything like that, which is another thing we got to look at, is not all of these ladies are going to be in this league for very much longer. So they're looking to set up their careers outside of football, which again, I completely and 100% respect. Let's go to the topic that I think everybody has talked about. And I raise my hand on this. Anybody that watches this podcast knows I have soapboxed on this particular topic a lot. So I'm going to hand my soapbox to you, Sarah. Soapbox it. What are your thoughts on this potential August start? And what are your pitfalls? What are your downfalls? And can you see any positives to this? Because I've railroaded this on both sides. I can see why it's a positive. I can see why it's a negative. And I've hit everything in between. I will let you have your soapbox here. Please tell me what your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I could talk about this all day, as I'm sure a lot of us could. I currently am really frustrated with the AFL. They need to give the women a start date no matter when it is. And that's probably where my opinion in general lies. It's that they need the information. They need to know, they need notice. Even from what you were just saying, like their lives are not football like the men's. Their football is part of their lives, but they don't have the option to make that their full career. So how are they possibly expected to back up and start playing a full season again in 3 months without the information? So I think what I've landed on is that I think we do need to move the season date. I think an August start date is a positive. I like that season timing. I think, though, that it should happen next year, and they should tell the players now, so they have a year to notify their jobs, to arrange their childcare options, to sort out, like people, even like what we were saying before, Sarah wrote, like what happens with her Gaelic football career now, and she doesn't even know now, and it's in 2.5 months. And so that, there's a possibility that you just lose half the players in the league for the next season because they can't get the time off work, and the money they get from footy means they don't have an option to not do that job, or they don't have they don't have the option to arrange childcare for 13 weeks of the year. Like all of these sort of things that you have to take it into account. And I'm really frustrated. I know the players are really frustrated that they're just not being given the notice to arrange their lives. And it's ironic that the men's seems to, and I don't hate the men's game, this is absolutely not what I'm saying at all, but their lives are footy and they do have the option to totally commit their entire career to footy. So why are they being given priority with things like CBAs and prioritising? I mean, their season doesn't change, but we saw during the pandemic that they got moved to a hub and the women's got cancelled. All these sort of things, it's symptomatic of what the AFL prioritises. And I know that people are really feeling that now. And are there going to be players that feel like they're just not appreciated enough to then rock up? I don't know, but I probably wouldn't blame them. So in my opinion, I think August start date is a good thing, but I don't think it should happen this year because we haven't got enough time. You know, all the players have started pre-season now, not knowing if they actually need to be doing it. Like they haven't had a proper break. And, you know, like I know Steph Chiocci replied to my tweet the other day about it and said that she's already been approved for leave without pay she's a teacher for term 3 and 4, not knowing if she actually needs it. Mm-hmm. So traditionally she takes term 1 off and then works the rest of the year, but now she's only working for 1 term. So it's all those sort of things that you just need to give them notice, and the AFL needs to acknowledge that it's a different structure to the men's and that they can't just throw things on them. Mm-hmm. That's I'll get off the soapbox.
No, don't. I say this, and I'll send you my podcast when I literally went off, and I don't mind it because I've sit here and I've told many of the females in footy journalism and many of the people that I said I'm a huge ally for the women's game, and I've said numerous times, I said there are way too many times decisions are made without discussing with the players. Number one. Don't talk with the board members and with the clubs themselves, because they're not going to give you the players' response. They're going to give you what's best for the club, not always what's best for the players. The part that's frustrating for me is that I agree with you. The men's league, unfortunately, I think the reason that they coddle the men's league is because that's the moneymaker. And again, this is no disrespect to the women's, but in the long run, the men's makes the money. Again, I don't agree with it, but I think that's the reason why they've kind of handled it the way they did. I mean, look at Gil going to New York to talk with Paramount Plus and all this for the new TV deal that doesn't even come up until after next season. So the priorities, I understand. It's frustrating because I agree. Do we really want the women's season starting this year? No. I mean, I don't mind waiting a year until August next year if that means these ladies can get their lives together, get everything set, and the next draft can go without any issues. I mean, the 18-year-olds, they're taking VCEs right about the time that the draft happens. So not only do you have the stress of taking your final exams, but you've also got the stress of getting ready for a NAB combine and then getting drafted and then having to go train there. So, it's been very fun. So I will definitely send you, I have a couple episodes during the AFL season that I kind of lambast. I go off on it. So I tell it to most of the AFL people, AFLW people I talk to. I am fully behind. I am an ally to you guys. I threw up the idea, instead of going to August this year, let's start in December. So it's only a month, take Christmas off around 2 weeks around New Year's, and then go into January, February. I know it's hot. I understand. But then that way you can end the season in February. You get March to August to get everything set up. And then you start August 2023.
Agree.
It's an idea. I know it's funky. I know it's weird because you got the Christmas holiday and New Year's Eve, but it's something to give a bridge between starting so quickly and giving a break. So I don't, it's very, very frustrating. So we'll pull our soapboxes, we'll put them in the corner. Unfortunately, they're not going to gather dust very long because I know they're going to come out really, really soon. So we'll pull away from that. I love to end my episodes chatting with people with some fun questions. And for me, again, I'm going to get down to Australia as soon as I possibly can. So I'm asking these questions for a little bit of research. So when you go to the footy, not as a journalist, so this is just you as a supporter, when you go there, what is the one food that you have to have at the footy?
Oh, footy pie.
That is the most common answer for everybody. They have to have the pie, but I have had some really interesting answers. I know I had one person who I chatted with who is a vegan, so they did hot chips. So it's a little bit of everything. And then one person said they don't eat at the footy because they're too nervous, they're too excited to watch the game. So it happens, but I loved the honesty. Absolutely awesome. So as a fan, when you go to the games, Marvel, MCG, where's your favorite place, like your best place to sit and watch the footy?
Oh, probably up on level 1 or 2, where you've got a and in the center of, I don't like being behind either of the goals. You want to be in the center where you can see everything. I always forget to take my glasses to the footy, so somewhere where I can see maximum amount that's going on. Yeah, but I also like to be sitting somewhere that's a little bit neutral. You don't want to be sitting totally amongst just Carlton fans or, you know, just the opposition. I like to be sort of in the centre amongst it, but yeah, not where it's too sort of intense. I think it's more enjoyable when you can sort of sit in there and soak up the atmosphere and just quietly barrack for the Blues without people screaming in your ear.
Absolutely awesome. So I gotta ask, and I've heard this before, a little jab at the Richmond fans. Does Marvel have no soul, or is it just one of those, it's a misunderstood stadium?
I don't know why people hate Marvel. It's I mean, when I worked at the AFL, our office backs onto Marvel, so I quite like Marvel actually. No, I think it has a soul. I think it's just not the spiritual home of footy. I think people just love the MCG more, but no, I quite like Marvel. I think the area in general, Docklands, is it traditionally has been a bit soulless, like there wasn't a lot going on. So I think possibly that's why people feel that way. The MCG, it's, I know you said you haven't been, but it's in the middle of Richmond and there's heaps of pubs and bars and it's a really fun, happening place. I think in general, Docklands, you sort of filter out into like the edge of the city and there's not that much going on. So I think that's probably what people mean, but I think it has a soul. I quite like Marvel.
Yeah, Coach Hardwick was the reason that it was, and I know Punt Road is like not even like 100 yards away from the MCG. So I mean, you could literally kick a footy to the Punt Road Oval from the MCG. I forgot to put this in my questions to you, but I got to ask this because I like asking, especially as a Victorian. The previous two grand finals have been outside of Victorian soil, not at the MCG, and I know it's been very interesting. And no, COVID is the reason why. So I got to ask this, is I surprisingly heard some Victorian media discussing this. Is I know that the MCG has the 50-year contract. So I know this is pie in the sky here. What are your thoughts on potentially the grand final being a traveling grand final? Or do you like it that it has to be a tradition, it has to be at the MCG because that's where it's been for more of the time? It hasn't always been there. It's been at Waverley and a couple other places.
Or I'm biased because I do live in Melbourne and I love having it here, but I actually do think that it would be more fair to have a travelling grand final. I think if you put in the work and you're successful enough to make the grand final, I think that you deserve to have it in front of your own fans. Yeah, so I do actually think that, but having said that, I do love having the footy parade and the vibe in Melbourne is really, really exciting on grand final day.
Yeah. And like I said, it's been very interesting, but I know everybody's like, well, it's the tradition. I said, I understand that, but what if you get a Brisbane Lions Gold Coast Suns grand final? I mean, it won't have the same effect because you have no Victorian teams there. Unlike Sydney, where you've got the South Melbourne connection. So if Sydney plays in the grand final, at least you've got Victorians that want to be there since the South Melbourne connection. I mean, Footscray unfortunately hasn't been around for a while. So Brisbane, the two Queensland teams, you would think a GAPA grand final would make a little more sense. But again, come see, come sa. It's the MCG. They've got that giant contract. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, but it's a fun question to ask. So I love asking this one. This is one of my favorite ones to ask because I've gotten some fun answers. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen? Men's, women's, juniors, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy that you've ever gotten to see live on television? Your call.
Ooh. Goodness me. Well, I've worked at a couple of grand finals. Having said that, that probably wasn't the best game of footy I've ever seen. It was a bit of a whitewash. I probably would go back to the first ever women's game. It was just, it was magical, and it had so much significance outside of footy. So it was a real win for women, a real win for, I think, the queer community who feel really heard and accepted within AFLW. And it was also a bit of a "we told you so" to the AFL, who underestimated how many people would rock up. So, and it was just fantastic to see Darcy Vesio kick that first goal and everyone just go off. So, I think probably that.
Awesome. Not a bad game. I've heard a little bit of everything for that question. So I love the different answers because it's always so much fun. Most of the time they tend to go with their favorite club, but I've even seen some ones where they pick something different. And I know the 2018 grand final between Collingwood and West Coast has gotten a few runs there for sure. So Sarah, this has been an awesome conversation. It's great to be able to sit here and chat with it because I know this year has been tough for female journos. And again, I've stated this to a few people. I know what you deal with. It sucks, but I appreciate everything that you do. I love that Craig interviewed you. I've been able to read some of your stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Please keep doing great work. You have a supporter here, even if it's just me. You have a supporter here that will always read your articles. So please keep up the great work. And for those that are watching this on YouTube that don't follow you, if you want, why don't you put out your socials? That way, maybe we can get you a few followers, more followers, getting to be able to see your awesome work for the age.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you have your Twitter account on you? So I'll make sure and definitely tweet that out so that everybody can get a hold of that. So
yes, I think it's just Burt Sarah. I think my Instagram is Sarah Burt. It's not very creative.
Sometimes if you don't have, if you're not out there that much, sometimes it's really easy to get your name on there. Cause I know mine's I go off mine's at Coach Has 40. It's relatively easy for me to remember when I tell people. So that
I think my Instagram is Sarah Burt and with 2 underscores.
Okay. Well, we will definitely make sure and get that out there. So maybe we can get you a few more people keeping an eye on that. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode in Donnie's Disposals. Again, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on your wonderful morning over there in Melbourne.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been heaps of fun.
All righty then. And really quick before we end, when the next AFLW seasons, if you have the chance, would you mind coming back on and doing a round review with me one time?
Love to. Absolutely.
Awesome. We will keep in contact. Definitely, for sure. We will get you on the podcast again. Love having people that watch the footy so much. So we will do that. This has been another episode in Donnie's Disposals. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen. I got a couple of things in the works, including potentially a 2-time men's premiership player potentially coming on the podcast very soon. We'll be back again with another AFLW round review or chat very, very soon. Have a wonderful evening.